thankful for your grace on my life. And we respond rightly with thanksgiving to what he's done in our lives. Then what we'll have inside of us is this mechanism of, and I don't want to do anything to violate my relationship with you. It's going to take you working in me, Lord. Strive to be at peace with all men and to live holy. And to live holy. If we care to live holy, that's the right response. If we value pleasing him, that's the right response. The opposite of that is the person who abuses grace, and they say, well, if it's all him that works in me, then I have a lot of wiggle room in what I can get away with, right? And Paul says, should we sin so that grace could just be bigger in our life? He says, no. Care to live rightly. Should we go ahead and just kind of do a c'est la vie lifestyle and just know that at the end of the day we can go to our, even as charismatics, have our little confessionals. And we go and we say, Lord, I'm so sorry for that. When the whole time God is saying, you knew going into that action that it didn't please me. You knew it. And that's not what grace is. It's not that get out of jail free card. It should spark us to care to please him. God wants us to live rightly. And he made that way through Christ. Responding wrongly. Another way of responding wrongly is this, is if a man says, if I can be sinless, I'll become righteous. My sinlessness will produce my righteousness. And that's not true. Your choice to be sinless at best will be temporary. And it doesn't produce righteousness. Actually, when you hear what God says, righteousness is going to cause you to want to run from sin, and running from sin is what produces sinlessness. And I like the lessnesses. All right? I like the lessnesses. When we embrace righteousness, when we embrace God's grace in our lives, when we embrace those things, it produces lessnesses. Like fearlessness. Like angerlessness. Like lustlessness. And manipulationlessness. Gossiplessness. Faithlessness less. Think about it. Wait for it. Wait for it. And we begin seeing this verse, Galatians 2:20, come alive inside of us. You've heard it before. It says, I've been crucified with Christ. I died with Christ. I've been crucified with Christ. And it's no longer I that live, but Christ that lives in me. That verse just makes sense there with that. It's no longer just me working and trying to be better. And I heard old preachers in times in the past say, you don't scale a fish before you pull it into the boat. You don't get your act right before you start living for the Lord. It is living for the Lord that gets your act right. And that becomes God's heart. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I that live, but it's Christ that lives in me. The life I live in the body, I've got to live this life in the body for several more years. I have to. The life that I live in the body, I live it in faith. The faith which is Christ, who loved me and gave himself up for me. I'm going to tell you everywhere in the Bible, when it comes to how you live, it all points back to Christ's work in your life. Constantly. Yes, we value living right. Yes, we need to be smart about what we do. Yes, we need to be proactive on things. Absolutely. But the ultimate result of our holiness, our right standing with God, will all be trusting in God's grace on our life through Christ. So the PowerPoint of today, as we kind of wind this down, the PowerPoint of today, it says, I have to live this fleshly life in faith. This fleshly life, this life. I have to live it in faith. I have to. Can't do anything less than it. I have to live this fleshly life in faith, knowing that I am apt to falter, trusting completely that his grace will give me all that I need right when I need it. You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to do two things with this. I'm trying first not to have you understand that you can't earn your right living. You can't earn righteousness. You can't earn holiness. I'm also trying to keep you from having a wrong response to God's grace and having that heart of thankfulness that acknowledges when God does something in you and you see it and you can thank him for it. We can have the best of intentions, we can have the best of efforts, but our flesh will never straighten out our heart. Only the heart that responds rightly to God's grace can straighten out the flesh. And Jesus has always been about the heart. He's always been about a heart turning toward him. He's always been about God, through him, doing a work in us. And oftentimes we end up striving and stressing and going to a difficult zone, trying to orchestrate our righteousness. Let's finish these verses real quick. We'll finish these with this. Make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy, because without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Verse 15. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and to defile many. Look up here for a second. See to it that you take care. See to it that you make an effort to making sure no one misses the grace of God. You miss the grace of God, and you find that bitter roots grow up and causes trouble and defiles many. Let me explain to you what that means. The person who strives, the person who has their walk with God built on works only. The person who says, my holiness, my righteousness will be on what I wear, or how often I'm doing this, or how often I'm that, or what my success rate is here. The person who's doing that will find that they can only go so far in their own strength. They'll find that they can only take that process so far, and they will become frustrated, and watch this, and become bitter. Maybe not at the Lord, but they'll become bitter with a whole lot that has to do with serving the Lord. And that ends up causing that bitter root where people just go, I don't know, I tried the God thing. I don't know. I was a deacon in my church and everything, and man, somebody said the wrong thing, and I don't go. I don't know. I love God, but and that's that evidence of that bitter root. That's that evidence of that. They didn't value getting things right with each other. They didn't value grace-creating holiness. And then when it came too hard of a process to really be successful at it, they became bitter toward it. And there are some amazing people. We have recently found the social networking site Facebook. And it's amazing who crawls out of the woodwork when you're on Facebook. People search for you, I guess, and they see that you're friends of other friends, and so they solicit for you to be connected with them. And there are people who have connected with us from, 20 years ago. And I'm blown away at some of the stories that, we kind of hear about. Some of the folks we know that were fired up for the Lord. And man, I believe their intentions and their issues were genuine. But they didn't respond rightly to God's grace. They allowed their own efforts to be what they put their stock in only. Man, when that failed, some of those folks aren't living for the Lord today. Some of them aren't in church today. People with callings of God on their life. And that can, God's faithful. God can restore that. Like that, God welcomes them back. Like that. But they got tired of striving. They got tired of creating it and keeping the momentum of their Christian walk going. Man, it's not about that. It's falling in love with Him. It's letting Him be your focus. Letting Him be your everything. That was God's heart. And that was God's intention all the time. So in the New Testament, in the epistles, Paul encourages his young student of ministry, Timothy. He encourages